All right, I can confirm. Hello, today is August 29th, 2018. This is the kubeadm office hours as part of SIG cluster lifecycle. Lubomir, you want to talk about a couple of things? I got to add some items to the agenda too. If folks who are on the call can add their deets to the attending list, that would also be helpful.
Okay, so the first item I added was about the end-to-end test we have currently a test grid, and I can share my screen. The idea here is to basically discuss which tests we should remove, and I can send a PR like later this week to help the testing for folks if we have a decision what can be removed. Should I proceed with sharing the screen?
Sure.
Okay. Just a second. Share. Okay. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right. So this is the cluster lifecycle section. We have some tests here that probably should be removed. The first one is the GC 1.8. I think the errors here are probably due to the Kubernetes Anywhere, which is still work in progress, the fix. And so this one, should we remove it?
Yes. Even the 1.8 to 1.9 upgrades should be removed.
Okay. So everything that contains 1.8 and 1.9 should be removed.
Well, I don't think we can remove 1.9 yet. I think we should probably wait because the window for 1.9 still exists, and the upgrade test from 1.9 to 1. The standard 1.9 test could be removed. The 1.9 on 110 and the 1.9 to 110 test could probably stay there for a period of time until we're like a couple weeks into the 112 cycle.
Okay. Understood. So here.
So the first 4 tests, basically.
Yeah. So these 4. Do we have something else here? No.
You could probably remove the GCE self-hosting one too. That doesn't need to exist anymore.
Yeah. I'm actually fixing this one right now. Yeah. I guess we can remove it. The GC funnel test is still valid.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, and the core DNS one is still, I guess. Okay.
The core DNS one, I don't know if we need that anymore. That was originally, I think you can remove core DNS. I don't know why the flannel one is there. That's got to be some legacy. I'm happy with removing the core DNS one because the default master does the right thing anyways.
Yeah.
We do have, like, as part of the issues for today, I was talking on SIG Cluster Lifecycle channel about that we need to get that image updated for core DNS to 122. That needs to be updated like as soon as possible for us to start getting testing signal.
Yes.
So
I think. Yeah, I think other people can push too, not only Team Hockey.
Only Googlers can push to GCRIO though. So like we're kind of in a, I'll wait for him, and I need to coordinate with the other folks who own /cluster to make sure that we get a unified update for 122 for core DNS to get rid of that other bug.
I'm pretty sure that Caleb Miles can push too. Yeah. I guess we can ping a Googler about this.
Yeah, so I think the first 4 tests, to go back to your main point, the first 4 tests there, the core DNS test doesn't need to be there. The self-hosting test can go away now. The flannel test, I have no idea why that's there, but we can deal with that.
And so core DNS and funnel, we are leaving them for now, but we can eventually remove them. And here,
I think you should move the core DNS one now. I don't think we need it because it's part of master. So like the master already does. There's no need to have a separate test for core DNS.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm remembering which ones to remove. Okay. So here in the upgrades queue, so first of all, I'm surprised that we support this even, like from 1.9 to 1.11.
So I'm going to defer this. This is stuff we in the kubeadm space do not need to maintain. This is all Googleisms for their /cluster directory because they support some of this stuff. So this falls squarely into Ravi. So we don't need to maintain this. We don't need to own this. This is squarely on Google, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch anything here.
Don't do that.
Yeah, but it's also like a strange situation because if the tests fail, they ask us why are they failing.
The standard answer is that anything that falls underneath these test suites, sometimes we need to do a minor triage, but then they goes back to the Googlers. So like CC, a certain group of owners, Mike, Denise, and Robbie are usually the routers to whoever would be the people that would fix those issues.
Okay. So here, I don't know what this is. So this is the multi-platform, my assumption is here.
I have no idea. Like, I think they want to get this stuff in place, but I don't think it's ready.
Okay.
For the multi-arch stuff.
So the Quest API is work in progress, I guess. And this is AWS is here. Okay, I'm gonna touch only the first section.
Okay.
I guess. So that's my agenda item for this specifically. Do you want to inject an agenda item like after this one?
I don't know what you're saying there.
I'm saying that if you want to talk about your agenda item, you can insert it after like.
The two ones that I don't know the answers to, and I have to follow up on, one of which I think the general PSA is that the 112 milestone is pretty locked in stone now, and to please triage the issues that are listed there. I'm going through them one at a time. So a lot of them are kind of finagly, long-standing bugs that require a fair amount of digging or other coordination with other SIGs. So I'm trying to just deal with them one at a time and burn them down. I think what is kind of asked for from the SIG right now is basically to start testing, the more cycles we spend testing and sort of vetting some of this stuff, the better it gets. And one of the conundrums or problems we have with kubeadm is we have a test suite, but that test suite is not exercised. And part of that test suite, I think, is meant to have tests. We can add tests to there that verify things like HA deployments. And eventually we'll have automation around that suite inside of the actual jobs that we post in test grid. We don't have all that yet, but if folks want to help with that automation, it would be highly helpful, right? Like if we had a test which verified portions of the HA deployment to make sure that they were sane and correct, that's highly useful because any regression there in the future would be it'd be faster to detect. And we don't have the HA deployment yet, but we are working on that with the cluster API implementation right now.
Do you think that in the future it will be great to block like features until they have like tests and docs?
Yes, I think for major features in the future, once we get to that stage where we have all the automation that we need in place, then I do think we should be blocking on tests and docs, and I will happily get that enforcement rule in place. We kind of been playing a little bit lax for a while because we are still in the long tail of beta. But as we solidify the config, like in next cycle, like I want to solidify the config and make sure that upgrade scenarios for HA deployments, for example, have a full set of tests. we don't have that.
Yeah, one problem I have with end-to-end tests is that I really don't know how to write them. And there are guides online, but my assumption is that this applies to other people too, like they simply don't know how to write the tests.
I can happily drag in Liz and myself to have a conversation to basically outline this is what is required to write an end-to-end test.
Yeah, we probably need like a separate session, like a guide, like a tutorial. And from there, it becomes a question of time, who is volunteering and who has the time to do it.
Yes. I think we need to set up the apparatus for 113. I don't think it's going to happen for 112. But I think right now we do need folks to kind of pivot from feature development work. There's a couple last features that need to get in, like the last PR changes from Fabrizio need to get done, as well as Liz's PR. But other than that, I think switching to bug triage mode early, so that way we can kind of lock down 112 and kind of coast through the end of this cycle. And hopefully we'll have full force back in place for 113 cycle. So at least from our side, and get other folks ramped up.
Yeah. So the VMware side, we are basically me and Ross. That's it. They don't give any more resources. So that's the open source effort we can afford, I guess.
Yeah.
So do you want to move to the next one?
Sure.
So I wanted to ask about this because we've been talking about it for like a couple of cycles, I guess, or more. And it's again a question of if we can do it for 112. It's the moving the phases commands into the init structure.
What we can do is we can prep PRs. And I think prepping PRs for 113 and making a hard push to beta is totally legit now. So if folks want to do the getting the work ready in place for 113, but we'll just hold on the PRs until 113 opens up, that makes total sense to me. The only reason why we wanted to wait was we wanted to make sure that like the beta config was all done, so we have guarantees for the configuration, because it affects almost every single command line now as we're changing these options, right? So like if people have, if we're going to give beta guarantees, we need to make sure that the CLIs don't change across the cycle. So if you pushed it into the other config, it'd be weird, right? So if we did this, if people wanted to prep the PR to change alpha phases into the specific verb for init or join or config, that is totally fine to do that now. And then we have 113 already properly front loaded.
Yeah, it feels like it could be risky to like move the commands now. It's probably better to wait for the config, like even for the next cycle, I guess. Like,
I think moving the commands could probably happen before the config is settled, because then the config will percolate through. It'll also kind of be a forcing function for us. Like,
yeah.
You know, we could ideally we would wait for config first, and then we would do the commands. But I think if we were to force the commands first, then there would be this whole conundrum, but where we have to get the config in place. And we kind of punted on config this cycle. We did a lot of churn, but there was good progress made, but it was also we still haven't finished off. So we should make the hard push in 113 to get the config to beta.
So I'm gonna wait like a couple of days for this, and I can start like I can set the PR for the movement. But is there a deadline for that? How many days do I have for the PR to open
before we can merge to master? That
no, I mean, to open the PR that moves the commands, basically, how many days do I have for that?
You mean how many days will you have to hold on to it and wait?
No. How many days do I have before I prepare the PR that moves the commands? Is this related to the code freeze?
No, like you could do this. I would wait until Fabrizio has his last config change in, because that would affect the CLI, and that's the last one that'll happen by next week Tuesday. Then from that point out, the config should be locked into 113. We should not, unless there's bug fixes. So besides bug fixes, we should not be doing major changes to the config. So V1 alpha 3 should be locked for 112 cycle. And that should be enough for you to make the shifts in the CLI. And you could just let that PR hold until 113 opens up. And it should just be a shuffling, right? For the most part, we might need to I would separate out some of the issues with some of the CLI things in alpha phases is they will need to find a new home. I would do pure shuffling as one PR, right? Like just stuff that goes straight into a init. Just do like this stuff is all init stuff, right? Just do that as one PR. I would not try to aggregate all of the changes of alpha phases into one PR. It will probably be a couple of them at least.
Yeah, one problem with this PR is that it's going to need a lot of rebasing because from my understanding is that you don't want to merge it for 112. We have to merge it for 113. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be major rebasing. I think you could probably plan it, prep it, and then as soon as 113 opens up, we can get it ready to go. Okay. I would do something very simple. It's always better to try to not do it all at once, because then you'll own all the dependencies that come along with it. If you just focus on just init, these are the subcommands that really belong in init. I think that will be unambiguous and pretty straightforward.
Okay, I guess we can open the PR next week. I mean, it's Fabrizio here. I wanted to talk about some things that I've noticed in the config. So the UID business, we are discussing this with you, Tim, with Ross, with Fabrizio, and so we currently Kubernetes has no way to get the machine UID. They only have like a small utility to generate compliant UIDs, but there's no way to get the machine UID. So do we want to go this way, like vendoring a separate library? I don't know if we can ask the API machinery folks to add them, or to add the library, or perhaps we should add it in kubeadm, or there's another option. We don't vendor the library and implement everything ourselves, which is...
I'm okay with vendoring a UUID library that guarantees uniqueness per machine. There's plenty of utilities that do this that are out there that are sort of platform agnostic utilities. There has to be. Like this is a state space of problems that has existed for a long time and has been solved in many other languages.
Yeah, can I share my screen again?
Sure.
Okay. Because I found some old issues about that, I wanted us to take a look at these. So this is the discussion we are having. So here I saw, so this is I'm going to open this one first. So this is an old one for 2015. We have Brian Grant commenting here. Yeah. So this is about the uniqueness of nodes. Like, so the question here is like, should we a vendor into API machinery, and like, is there currently a way to in Kubernetes to identify the nodes? Are they really unique?
I'd have to dig. There's probably been multiple attempts, like you probably found a couple of different PRs. I'm sure there are other ones or issues that have been filed. I can sync with folks and try and figure that out. I do think that it would be ideal to have a UUID versus something like a relying on host name, because that's not guaranteed unique, right? So if you're doing a join, the whole issue, the predicated issue here is that if you're doing a control plane join and you want to append to a list of API endpoints to have a canonical list of control plane nodes, you'd want to have unique, ideally you'd have some type of unique identifier. So that way, it could be tracked over time of what has actually joined this cluster or joined as a control plane.
So somebody else suggested MAC addresses.
That'll work too. That's reasonable-ish.
I can't find any usage of I can't find any code that fetches MAC addresses from the networking interface in the Kubernetes currently. Maybe I'm not searching correctly, but
I think we can hash on this idea. I don't think we need to have everybody here to talk about this one. I think the general constraint of having a unique identifier per machine is not new. I think the question is whether or not we need to bake it into our status. And I think the answer is we need some identifier, at least for the time being. Ideally, it would be unique, at least from my perspective. I don't know if other people have other thoughts there. Like Jason, do you have thoughts? He's on mute.
So I saw some issue reports that I think it was from Mike Dennis, that he's saying that he creates a cluster with virtual machines. They end up with the same machine UID. That's a problem. And there was a comment from Lucas. I don't have the issue in front of me. Lucas also commented that the nodes have to be unique. And we have this documented right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually very easy to end up with same IDs of virtual machines.
Yeah, Jason, we are talking about UIDs. Do you have a comment in terms of UIDs on virtual machines? Are they unique? Can we use them for the status in the config map?
So if there are actual UIDs on the machine themselves, then I would worry, like Ross said, about them being duplicated across virtual machines or improperly kind of managed cloud instances.
Let me, I think we can probably table this. This is not a unique state space of problems. Let's loop in some other folks and try to see if we can get a resolution on this. If we need to, host name is not unique, but it's what we use for everything else. For lack of a better term, it's what we've done for all the other goo. It will solve the problem, get it over the hurdle for a period of time, because it's just an index, right? The index gives you the actual IP header inside of the status information. So if we need to do that, that would be the simplest solution. But it's not.
It's not ideal, but Kubernetes already requires node name to be unique anyway. And if host name is used by the default for that, then there's going to be other issues involved if they reuse the same host name between two nodes anyway.
It will, yep. So
we can pretty much, instead of UIDs, use the host name here?
You can, or the node name, whatever, because like the name can be overridden by the node, and there can be only one. But I don't know if you're going to get that interjects a query problem, right? Because you can override the no name, right?
Well, if they're overriding it, they would be doing it in the kubeadm default anyway, wouldn't they?
Yeah. You would have to pass it through. So you would have the argument being passed through all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'd have to double check this. I know you can do it on the kubelet to override the node name. I have not seen whether or not you can actually plumb through the node name override on a control plane instance on a NIT. I don't actually know the answer to that. I know for certain you can do it on the kubelet or on the join.
Couple of bugs related to this override, so those overrides not really working.
For the join for the node, that should work.
If I remember correctly, there were a couple of bugs where like it pretended works, but different code paths and kubelet uses the host name anyway.
I recall the bug you're talking about. Well, I think we can find a solution. I don't think we need to group think this one through. I think there's an issue there. If folks have strong opinions or thoughts on it, and we can probably defer to that issue. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, basically this is blocking like the PR from Fabrizio, and we have to tell Fabrizio what is ideal here. Maybe we should go with the host name. So we need to make a decision here to like tell Fabrizio what to do. What is the key for fetching a status?
I still don't. Well, okay, we don't. This was the argument that we originally had in the config change of putting it as a map, like whether or not we need a key or whether or not we can just have a list of IP address too, right? So like as you do join, you're just appending to the list. So I think hostname for now is fine, and we can always address this because the control plane join is still experimental. Just put a comment block around it and be like, for now, we'll use hostname as the index for the key. And yes, we know that there can be issues and collisions potentially with this, but it is what it is for right now.
Okay. I'm gonna end this. Let's end this topic. I'm gonna make a comment in the PR that Fabrizio made. Something else I wanted to talk about is about the config, and so we have feature gates in the join configuration, but also there are feature gates in the init configuration, cluster configuration, more precisely. So do we want to have feature gates in the join configuration? Is this correct?
Depends what the gates are. I'd have to take a look because I don't know what feature gates apply anymore because we have our own version of feature gates that are not the same as upstream. Not the same as KK or the actual other components, right? The major feature gates. We have our own version of that. So if something applies to the join configuration for the kubelet, then maybe, but most of the feature gates that I'm aware of were control plane related. What feature gates are you thinking of?
I lost track of the list, and basically we have to figure out if it's okay to have a separate list of feature gates for the worker nodes. That's the bigger question.
I could take a look. If you want to file an issue to do like audit feature gates for 112 on join configuration.
Okay. I'm gonna file an issue about that. So the next topic, we spoke about it like the last time. So we have feature gates in the we have potential for feature gates on worker nodes, but we don't have a separate image repository. Like the only way to get the image repository is to join the cluster and then fetch the image repository from the config map. Like it is stored in the cluster configuration.
So this was like a conundrum. I don't think we should fix this for one. The segregation of two use cases, this is the one where we talked about, we said like we should defer to what customers and people who use kubeadm want. like having the segregation between nodes and the whole cluster space for registries, I think should be driven by demand. If there is demand for it, then sure. But I don't see it as we need to address this for 112. Like, I think there are far more finagly issues that have existed for a long time. Like, we want better documentation to reference for how to set up cloud provider integration. That's like a concrete thing that needs to get done for all of the cloud providers as they move stuff out of tree. That should be like an on-demand scenario more so than I think driving that type of feature addition. I think it's probably more prudent to address the current bug lists that we have and try to burn it down for the rest of the cycle. I don't think making a config change is worth it unless we have users who are saying like we really need this.
Yeah, I'm seeing like some of the reports I saw is were about like people don't have a way to set the pause image. The pause image is currently bound to the image repository in the cluster configuration.
Yes.
And they pretty much wanted a custom location for this specific image. Like,
that's weird though. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I can understand a different registry for things like add-ons, but like if for your control plane, the kubelet and the proxy and when you're doing a join, right, it's just part of the control plane. I consider part of the control plane. So I don't see why you would have a separate location. We can always just defer and say like there can be only one you can only have one registry repository for your major images. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be GCRIO. We allow you to override, but we call it the cluster configuration image repository and go. I don't think that's a tough constraint for people to swallow, but I think if there's enough pushback, then we'll make a change. But I'm not convinced, to be honest, given the fact that the whole world revolved around GCRIO for the last 3.5 years. You know.
Yeah. So do you think this is a problem? Like the worker nodes don't have the image repository until they join the cluster. Do you think that's a problem? Like,
no.
The worker nodes are going to use the default location, and the control plane node can have some completely different image repository.
I know what you just said there. I didn't parse that. My understanding is that it pulls the cluster configuration down and then applies that standard configuration as part of the join for the default parameters that are there.
So it's like it first fetches a cluster configuration and then applies it.
Yes.
So I got the order wrong here, I guess. Yeah.
Yep, and I think that you only need like the pose image when joining, and that's pretty much after the join. It's needed after the join.
So we still need an image, but it's after the join, right?
Yep.
Huh. Well, I guess we can leave this topic for later.
You can always file the issue. Like when in doubt, like file the issue with details of the user story and the use case scenario. If there's a hole in the current logic, then we should fix that hole. But if there isn't, and if it's more of a feature request for splitting, which it kind of sounds like to me, then we should drive the feature requests based on user demand, but we shouldn't drive that feature otherwise. I don't think there's a user story that makes a ton of sense for that. But if there's a bug in the logic and the ordering, then we should go fix that.
Okay. Well, I do have a user story for a pause image. I'm going to leave this for another time. Does anybody have any agenda items? I'm kind of done.
I think the general PSA to focus on 112 burn down and documentation updates is beneficial. The list has been triaged. So feel free to, and the standard rules apply. So if anything is not marked as lifecycle active, anyone can take it. Some issues are finagly and thorny, but I do think they require addressing. I'm going to try and dive into the proxy problem and see if I can force something through this cycle.
Which proxy problem was that?
Hostname override for the proxy.
Oh yeah. Well, do we need to adjust priorities for some of the items in the backlog, or is it like?
I do think, like, what I'm going to plan on doing is I'm going to do a pass through bugs. Everybody should look at their backlog of bugs that are inside the 112 cycle. And then there's 36, I believe. 38. So most of them should be reasonable-ish. Some of them might need to get punted out if it's not possible to do. I think the big ones of upgrading need to be verified. Those ones, I'm sure we're going to find issues along the way. So if you start to do, upgrading of the control plane for this cycle and making sure that all the configuration works properly and migrates properly, that's going to be key. Because we've had a number of issues over time with configuration migration and upgrades. So that'd be a key area to focus on.
Yeah, we had a discussion with Chuck and Liz about this one, like improvements. This is from the planning document.
Yep.
And it was a matter of who has the time to do it. And also, I think it was a bit unclear what the details are. To be honest, I thought that we moved this one to GA, but like you're saying, this is important.
I think I left it there because we need to use that issue as a means of verifying that behavior is correct. But the actual overall improvement of having a slightly different flow, that would be probably for 113 or GA.
We can try. In general, we're taking more work that we can handle.
Well, I think I pruned down 112 to a reasonable list. A lot of that stuff is we need to finish off what we already have done, like the checklist for control plane join, as well as the HA configuration stuff basically overlaps with it too. So.
Yeah. If Fabrizio is not on the call today. Control endpoint. So this is related to the status we are doing as well, I guess.
Yes.
All right. Well, we have 1 month to finish everything here, I guess.
Yeah, there's 38 issues, and folks can jump on any particular one, and we can also clarify. I left some things open that were kind of like feature-based. That the graduate pooch tokens, that's not even in our boat. Like, somebody else is actually doing this within API machinery. We just need to make sure that when it's done, that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And ideally, we move some of that goop that's in our stuff that shouldn't be inside of our our configuration out. So.
Yeah. I guess we're just monitoring here, keeping a track of an issue.
Yep. So if folks want to do a separate session, like maybe next week we can actually iterate through this list, get and do some initial testing, then we can actually refine this list for the rest of the cycle. Because right now this is like the first pass cut. I expect it to be modified as people actually test stuff and find bugs.
Do you have a plan for a specific day, like which day you can have a separate meeting?
We could probably just do the office hours of next week.
Okay.
Next week, Wednesday seems totally legit and reasonable. Like start testing now, start opening issues, and we can kind of triage and deal with the list that currently exists right now, and then we'll refine it as we folks start testing.
Yeah, so this one is about the pause image I was talking about. Somebody has a use case. And I'm planning to move this away from 112. We might move it to GA, I guess. Or even like, I have a PR, but the PR, it finds, like I'm saying, it finds like problems in the current structure of the config. Yeah, I'm just, I suggest that I move this to GA. What do you think?
That sounds fine to me. Yep.
Okay.
I think the only reason I left it open was it was marked as lifecycle active.
Yeah, there's a PR, but there are basically problems with the config is changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add this to GA. We can eventually bring stuff back from GA to the 113 milestone for the next cycle.
I think once we get into planning, which we might do a little bit earlier, even before 113 opens up, when we start doing a planning session, I would like to be a little bit more concrete and have less sprawl. So like the configuration to beta and the phases, like just be super concrete, like those are the primary things we want to deliver in 113, because that will focus us instead of trying to solve all the things. Because sometimes whenever we get an opening of a cycle, everyone's like, it becomes a wish list, and then we have to sort the wish list. And I think it makes a ton more sense to say, like, these are the highest priority things that we've had for a long time, and we need to address those first. And other stuff, feel free to open the issue, but we're not going to really spend a ton of time trying to get it onto a roadmap if folks aren't going to commit to it, because that kind of is also been a problem, right? So for like 112, we had a bunch of open issues. Like our bug count went plus 50, between 112 and between 111 and 112. And basically it's like a wish list of other things that folks have not committed to, actually helping to execute on. So I think we need to be realistic about some of the stuff we can accomplish within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, I'm going to take a look at the whole backlog for 112 myself and see what I can do. I mean, what is possible to do.
Yeah. So feel free to poke me if there's any ambiguity on Slack, because that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm burning down the issues that I have assigned to myself, and I'm poking folks because some of them cross SIGs. And I'm going to open up some other issues like the core DNS one. I reopened that issue because we need to solve the core DNS image version and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we need to get multi-architecture images, even if we don't like announce them to be like.
I'm going to kind of punt on some of that stuff. I don't think that's our responsibility. But as SIG cluster lifecycle, that stuff is kind of owned by other areas, both release and testing. I do think once that work is in place, we should vet it. But we're not owners of that content, right?
Yeah. So we have 3 minutes, I guess. I think there was a PR. I mean, I'm going to leave this discussion. Somebody was adding a new add-on to the website again, like one of those add-ons that we don't have tests for. I think you suggested to use Sonoboy to like have a conformance output that maybe if the PR submitter.
Oh yeah. Like if you want to add some new XYZ to the default set of CNI plugins or other list of add-ons, that you should vet it first, because there's no test coverage for any of that stuff. There's another major conundrum, which, if folks are looking for things to do, the default configuration of CNI for containerd needs to be addressed, right? Like, we're currently looking at some of that stuff, but it'd be helpful if other people did that, because there is no default Docker configuration. We need to update the docs for the 112 cycle, right? It has to be containerd or cryo, and there needs to be docs in place to point people in the right location to how to get this stuff. And eventually we need to update the tests as well.
So the docs, they're a big subject as well. We didn't cover anything. I mean, I guess Jennifer was probably busy with other projects. She didn't have the time to make the big move to help us with that. Do you think I should be moving this like in the next month? Do you think I should start doing this and see the reaction from SIGDocs?
The big move? No, I would wait for them to own that space. They said they were going to do it. They should own it. But we should push on them for the time being. I think there's other stuff that we need to do on our side, that makes a ton more sense. Like getting the CRI documentation in place to recommend for users is super important from our end. And we need to coordinate that with the SIG-Node folks. There's an open issue I can loop you in on too, which is basically like there needs to be a step in the installation instructions that basically points out to, like, here are the CRIs, go pick one. And here's the installation instructions for each individual CRI for the different platforms. Because Docker 17.03 is dead beef now, so.
Alexander, do you think that Ed Bartosz can help with that? I'm sure that he knows how to set up pretty much every single CRI out there.
Yeah, sure. Loop in whoever can do it to get the documentation in place, but that needs to get done.
I'm not sure about every different CRI, but at least two he tried, yes.
Okay, well, that will be appreciated. So one question about this particular page here. It's about kubeadm in it. We have authored content here. And that is kind of part of the big move, but I really wanted to move this away of the page for 112. Tim, do you think that I should do it? And like, do you have an idea where I should be moving stuff? Like in the cluster create for the single master, I guess. We have a configuration example, and everybody goes to this page, and they are using this page, but I think we shouldn't be using this page. Like, I wanted to do this for 112, like move the config out of here. And Lucas promised that he's going to write like a separate document for explaining how the config works. But this is alpha, and I think
I still. Why don't we take this one offline? I still am of the opinion, I have been for a while, that we should, all of the configuration for the master config / cluster config and init config breakout should really be in GoDoc that gets referenced from the mainline documentation for specific versions. Because I don't feel like maintaining this is tenable, right? So if we actually had proper GoDoc documentation where we actually have the examples listed out, so you can do proper GoDoc documentation where you have separate individual examples and you reference them in the main line, that would be more beneficial and more maintainable as we shift from or mature the API over time.
Yeah, I guess. So basically, we should keep this for now. Like, we have an init workflow here, and we have the alpha docs. I guess we should keep this in here until we have like a solid idea what we should do.
We will need to, there's either two options. One is we actually get the GoDocs in place and we update it, or two, we need to maintain this and update it for the next cycle for 112.
Yeah. Well, we do have this this page for the API reference, but it doesn't have any example. It's
You can add examples in Godot, and I think that's probably more the proper way to do this, because then it differs.
Mm-hmm. And we can maintain it from the code base.
Exactly.
Okay, I guess I can add an action for myself here, but I'm not sure we should. I mean, it's an optional action for 112, I guess.
Yes.
All right. I don't have anything else.
Are there other group topics? Going once, twice, 3 times? Okay, we'll call it then. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.